Good afternoon, Miss. Today I'm going to be giving a case briefing on a case R versus Ahmed. This case has a process of criminal law in it. It talks about three major factors of criminal law: abuse of process, entrapment, and dialogue dope operations. So first, let me talk about what entrapment is. Entrapment is the luring by law enforcement agents of a person into committing a crime. A person is entrapped when he or she is induced or persuaded by law enforcement officials or their agents to commit a crime that he or she had no previous intent to commit. The legal elements. Entrapment is an act of government agents or officials inducing a person to committing a crime that he or she was not previously willing to commit. Common acts of entrapment include illegal sales of liquor or narcotics, bribery, sex offenses, or even gambling. So, in the case of R versus Ahmed, M- Ahmed was entrapped by the police when they had called him asking to buy drugs. But Ahmed was a commonly known drug dealer, and the police had gotten his phone number through an unverified tip. Once Mr. Hamid had been arrested, he argued that the police officer's conduct constituted entrapment, as they had induced him into committing the crime. The Supreme Court of Canada disagreed, finding that the police officer's conduct did not reach the level of conduct, egregious conduct necessary to constitute entrapment, and Mr. Hamed had previous intent to sell the drugs to the police, as he had used as the police had identified him as the use of the phone number when he had used commonly known drug deal terminologies and languages. This is was how the officers knew that they have found a drug dealer. Legal issues and cross connections. The legal issue in the case is whether or not the police officer's conduct constituted entrapment. The case raises issues of police officers' conduct and use of entrapment as a defense. This case will be most relevant to a criminal law course. It will also be of interest to courses on police powers and civil liberties. Police officers cannot offer a person who answers the phone the opportunity to commit an offense without having formed reasonable suspicion that a person using that phone or that phone number is engaged in criminal activity. Whether the police are targeting a person, place, or phone number, the legal standard for entrapment is a uniform one, requiring reasonable suspicion in all cases where police can provide an opportunity to commit a criminal offense. Reasonable suspicion. Reasonable suspicion is a familiar legal standard that provides courts with a reasonable objective basis on which to determine whether the police have justified their actions. It protects individuals' interests and preserves the rule of law by ensuring courts can meaningfully review police conduct. It requires that a constellation of objectively discernible facts give the officer reasonable cause to suspect that a certain kind of crime was being committed by a particular person or in a particular place. Charter rights infringed. To make sure that the law of entrapment was fair to both parties, the Supreme Court ruled that the police could not perform a dialogue dope operations without having viewed three substantial factors. The police cannot randomly approach people and offer them opportunities to commit crimes unless they are sure that unless they have reasonable suspicion that crime is being done in that area. B. The police officer must reasonably suspect that a specific type of crime is being done in that area. C. The police had formed reasonable suspicion by the time that the opportunity was provided. This is the only way to strike a proper balance between pursuing the law and infringing on the rights of people. When the police had called Ahmed's phone, they had taken his private phone number and called him, outrightly entrapping him into a drug sale. Mr. Hamad's Section 8 Charter of Rights and Freedoms was infringed because the phone number is a private means of communication, not to be shared publicly. Mr. Hamid had not disclosed his phone number to the police, neither had he given it out to people as a public means of communication, meaning that his rights to life, liberty, and security, as pertains to a human being, had been infringed. If the police officers cannot prove or do any of these three factors, they could be charged with an abuse of process. The Supreme Court's decision. The Supreme Court of Canada's decision in this case is significant as it sets a high bar for what will constitute entrapment. The decision may make it more difficult for defendants to successfully raise the defense of entrapment. This case is also of interest as it raises questions about the police use of dial-up operations. These type of operations have been criticized as being unfair to vulnerable people who may be induced to commit crimes they would not otherwise have committed. My opinion. I believe that the police had gone too far with their efforts to entrap the accused, and as a result, the accused's church rights are being violated. This case has important implications for the way police officers conduct dial-up operations. In particular, it highlights the need for police to be careful not to use excessive force or coercion when trying to catch suspected drug dealers. I believe that the court's verdict was unfair. The police should not have the power to entrap someone into committing a crime. The police must have evidence that the person was going to commit a crime anyways, and they can't just set up a sting operation and try to bait people into breaking the law. This case is important because it sets a precedent for how the police can conduct investigations. Genuinely believe that this had gone too far, and the Supreme Court of Canada needs to set a bar for how the law of entrapment can be done. Thank you.